Welcome to the Wolverine Digest podcast, the best spot for objective and authentic coverage of Michigan athletics. If you want open dialogue, honest opinions, and in-depth coverage of the maize and blue, this is the podcast for you. And now, here's your host, Brandon Brown, joined as always by Chris Breiler.
I was going to start by saying go blue.
Well, Chris, the damn fight song was short-lived.
It was short-lived.
You know, we came back to it on a Monday. Big win. Big win over Penn State. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Well, we had it for 4 days. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Felt good about playing the fight song. And then today, more to pile on to the shit show.
Yeah, I think that's an accurate description of what's going on. I mean, there's, you know, I talked about it a little bit today. I've seen some back and forth on social media. I think no matter what happens in this scenario, there's going to be people, Michigan fans in particular, that, you know, it's a witch hunt. You know, there's not really much to it. Everything that Michigan does is right. You know, they're firing guys who are found guilty. And, you know, on the flip side, there's going to be, you know, the group of people that think everything Michigan's done is wrong. And I'm just trying to live somewhere in the middle based on the information that came out today. And I thought, you know, somebody who's pretty pro-Michigan, I think we would both agree on, if you know him, most Michigan fans would know him, Rich Eisen, a respected voice in the sports community, came out today after news broke that
I thought you were going to refer to yourself.
No. It's me. I'm the respected voice. No, not quite. Rich Eisen is he's a Michigan alum.
Yeah.
He has been, probably one of the strongest defenders of the Michigan program throughout this entire thing. And once news broke today that linebackers coach Chris Partridge was fired, and then you get the Yahoo Sports report about a sports booster who was reportedly funding Connor Stallion's scouting scheme, who has since denied it, by the way. You know, Rich Eisen went on his show and he said, essentially, I can't defend it anymore. I can't defend it, you know, and he kind of summed up, I think, what I was trying to say earlier today, which is it felt weird on Monday, standing in Schembechler Hall and listening to Jim Harbaugh talk about how adamant he was about fighting the Big Ten and having his day in court and due process and all of the strong talk coming from Michigan, just to get to a place on Thursday where it was like, you know what? Never mind. We're not going to do that. It felt weird. It felt like something was a little fishy. And I think today we got some insight into why you saw a quick change of heart with the firing of Partridge and, some of the other things that were revealed today.
Yeah, I think because we were you and I and Trent were kind of going back and forth in the group text, and Trent especially was like, this is just so weird. Harbaugh's not the kind of guy to just concede. You know, he's not the kind of guy to admit guilt. And by taking the suspension, it's almost like he's admitting guilt. And I'll admit, I guess I was probably pretty wrong at this point, because I thought, you know, Harbaugh taking whether you think it was too much of a suspension or not, whatever. He accepted the 3 games and said, I'll take it. I took that as it's almost like they made a deal. We're going to be done with our investigation. There's no chance this spills into Big Ten championship week, bowl season, college football play. Like, we're done. We are done. And Harbaugh said, I'll take the 3. You know, somebody got in his ear and said, look, man, they just suspended you for 3 games without finding any proof already. They could do it again and again and again. And so that's where my head went. I thought Harbaugh finally had some saw the light, or somebody talked to him about it, maybe some legal people, whatever, and said, look, this is probably the best deal you're going to get. Take the 3 games. The Big Ten has agreed to be done. Otherwise, you know, Chris, you mentioned it multiple times. They worded it in such a way that they could just come back again, and there's going to be more punishment if we want. If we want to do, we could do it again. If we want to suspend another, we'll do it again. And so I thought Harbaugh finally saw, okay, this has been a pain in my ass. I'm over it. I'm sick of it. It's done as of that last regular season game. Yeah, that means he's missing victory 1,000. Yes, that means he's missing Ohio State. That blows. He doesn't want to miss those, but at least then he would be done. And now that's not what this was. It's pretty clear at this point. I don't think that's how it went down.
Yeah, and I mean, even when the University of Michigan released its statement on Thursday, and the wording of that statement made it seem like the Big Ten was done investigating. As far as the sportsmanship violation, but when the Big Ten put out their statement, like it was just worded a little bit differently, and it essentially said we're going to continue to work with the NCAA hand in hand with the NCAA in Michigan, and we'll see what happens. And I think, again, if you're someone who just thinks, and you had mentioned this a little bit, if you're someone who just thinks that because Jim Harbaugh accepted the suspension that it means everything is over, I think today once again has proven that that's not the case at all. And I just don't see this as being something that's going to go away anytime soon. I feel like this is going to be something that continues to grow, continues to evolve, may see other staff members dismissed. I don't know. I said it earlier today that I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of speculating too much, but it's also kind of part of what we do in our job to, talk about what we think is happening within the program. And it just sounds like the NCAA isn't close to being done with its investigation yet. The thing with Chris Partridge came out of left field. I know there's been some smoke around, what's going on with Steve Klinkscale. He deleted his Twitter, and, there's rumblings about Jay Harbaugh out there. And I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but I'm just saying that anybody who thinks this thing has come to a conclusion with what happened today, I think if you've learned anything since this started, it's don't expect anything. Like, expect the unexpected. Expect another name to pop up. Expect it to take another weird. I mean, Uncle T. Like, who the hell is that? What is that all about? I think we know, well, suspected who it is. He has since denied it, but this is just a story that continues to get weirder and weirder as the days go by. It is and I said this earlier, going into the season and thinking about what kind of team Michigan had, the guys that they were returning, the leadership they had on both sides of the ball. It's really, really disappointing to be at this place at this point in the season with a team that could very well likely win a national championship.
Yeah, I was gonna say we've had Connor Stallions incognito. Now we have code names, Uncle T. It's like, what is this, dude? What is going on?
Well, Connor Stallions allegedly incognito. By the way, it's weird that staffer on Central staff hasn't come forward yet. It's taken a long time for him to be like, hey, it was me.
It's floating down the Chip River somewhere, apparently, just relaxed and living the dream. Breaking news: I have Connor Stallions here. I'm kidding. It's just been weird, and we kind of jokingly, like, dude, I was dressed up as the guy last week, and I'm like, I can't even take it serious anymore. Like, the real things that are happening are so weird and so wacky and so out of left field. Yes, you hate to hear that somebody was fired. I mean, people are losing their livelihoods over this thing now. Started with Connor Stallions, now Chris Partridge. It sounds like there may be more to come. Whether you would believe or not that this Uncle T is Tim Smith, I mean, his name has been put out there by multiple outlets. I mean, this isn't even a secret at this point.
And by the way, it's worth noting he was let go from Champion Circle.
Correct.
They took the step. It's the Michigan NIL Collective. The biggest Michigan NIL collective that's out there. They sent him a text and said, look, you're out. So
feels eerily similar to how things happened with Connor Stallions at the beginning. Immediately. Look, dude, when you've got 100 people on staff and God knows how many boosters they have, and they handpick your name out of somewhere, it's not by accident. And oh, by the way, Connor Stallions suspended with pay. With pay, though, dude. He didn't do anything. Yeah, he did. Just like I thought from day one. Yes, he did. And now Tim Smith, removed from the Champion Circle, no longer affiliated with anything like what? Why? Why would that happen unless there wasn't at least a little bit of fire with this smoke that comes with it? And the dots kind of connect. A couple former military. I mean, like, look, you said it. I'm with you. I don't want to speculate. I'm not ready to bury anybody on something I don't know for sure about. But at the 3+ week point of this thing, the way it's been going, I'm kind of starting to just believe things as they come now. Like there was a time where I wasn't ready to do that. I'm there. Every time a new one of these things comes out, it's hard not to be like, yeah, I get it now. That happened. Oh, that also happened. Oh yeah, that's probably the guy. Like I don't know how you could not feel that way at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I defended and have defended Michigan throughout this whole thing. You know, and I think that's the thing that people don't get when they they follow the Winged Helmet or they follow Wolverine Digest or they tune into what we do and they know the nature of our work. And there's almost an expectation among fans that we're supposed to just advocate for Michigan all the time, which really isn't the case. I mean, the job itself is to try to be fair, impartial, non-biased. And as much as you try to do that, like it's hard for me to not have a bias when I care as much about the program as I do. But over the course of the last several weeks, it's just almost day by day, it gets harder and harder to defend the program. And when Michigan took a hard stance, when they found out that Jim Harbaugh was suspended on their way to Happy Valley, and it was, we're going to take this to court. We're going to fight this thing. I want due process. I want my day in court. To just give up on it was pretty deflating as a Michigan fan. And I find myself a little bit conflicted because I think at the end of the day, like no matter who on this staff ends up going and who remains, really the biggest talking point here is how is it going to impact Jim Harbaugh and his future at the Michigan football or as head coach of the Michigan football program. And I asked Trent this, our other contributor earlier, and I'm curious where you stand on it. Like I think you were at the press conference with me when Jim Harbaugh was asked specifically, is it a head coach's job to know everything that's happening within the program? And Jim Harbaugh said, I think that goes without saying. Yeah. You know, so essentially, yes, it's my job to know. So given what we know and probably what's left to come, I think it's safe to assume this isn't the end of it. We don't know how much more is going to come out, but probably not the end of it. What responsibility do you think falls on Jim Harbaugh's shoulders here? And more importantly, I guess, what do you think the NCAA response is going to be as it relates to next season?
Well, I will say this, the more that this thing continues to spread, the less and less I believe that Harbaugh didn't really know what was going on. When I thought maybe it was just Stallions running off to dress up like a Central Michigan coach, I'm like, there's no way Harbaugh knew about that. There's just no way. I couldn't bring myself to say that. Now, Partridge is fired for apparently not cooperating. Or I think I even heard that he might have been like destroying technology to try to get rid of evidence or something. Like that's a bad look. If there's another coach, Clinkscale's deleting his social. I know Jay Harbaugh's name has been floated. Now you've got a prominent booster's name in the mix. I can't say it anymore. I can't say that Harbaugh didn't know that this was one superfan slapdick just taking things to the next level. That's not what was going on. And part of me always thought like, well, Stallions I thought he was acting kind of on his own. I did, but I was like, well, I think some other people probably had to know something was going on. And now the more that this goes on, and another day and another name and another layer, it just keeps looking worse. I mean, like you just said, I didn't see the comments, but I feel like I'm rationalizing this the same way you just explained Rich Eisen did. Like he just flat out said he can't defend it anymore. Were those his exact words? I mean,
he said that Michigan deserves all of the scorn, that he's embarrassed by it. Yeah. I see we got Texas high school football in the house. Do not click on that link for God's sakes. Yeah, I mean, like I said, here's a guy who, went to the University of Michigan, wrote for the Michigan Daily. Like, he's a Michigan man through and through, and defended this program vigorously through the first, few weeks of this thing. And I think when you get people like that are like, okay, this isn't good. This is not a good day for the program. That's where I felt. It felt very deflated. And I disagree to a certain extent with what you said. I don't think Jim Harbaugh was aware. I don't think he knew. He said it multiple times that he, didn't know this was going on, had no part in it, and would never condone it. And he said it multiple times. And so I take him at his word. If it's not truthful, then we'll address that down the road. And that opens up a whole other can of worms, which I think there's just no way he can remain at the program. But I take him at what he said. So I feel a little bit conflicted because you have Jim Harbaugh himself saying he wasn't aware, didn't know. But now you have 2 members of the staff fired who had some sort of involvement in this thing. It feels like there's going to be more to come. And he said himself that it's his responsibility to know what's going on within the program. And so, look, I'm glad Michigan is firing people as more information comes out. That's the action they should take. But I also think it's not a good place to be in when you're hanging your hat on the fact that Michigan is firing people at the appropriate time. And I said this earlier, like you try not to lump everything in together because everything is sort of its own situation. But then when you go back and you look at what happened with Matt Weiss, and you look at Shemi Schembechler, and you look at Connor Stallions, and you look at Chris Partridge, at some point in time, you kind of have to you got to wonder how much responsibility does Jim Harbaugh have for all of this? These are his people, his decisions at the end of the day, his staff. And that's where I'm conflicted because on one side, I feel bad for him because I don't think he knew. But on the other side, man, you're the head coach. This is your baby. These are your people. And this shit was going on under your nose and you didn't have any idea. And that's not necessarily a great look either.
I mean, I see some people just vehemently disagreeing with what I'm saying. That's fine. It's what you talked about. I mean, there's some people who could watch Harbaugh cut heads off of puppies on the 50-yard line and they'd still be like, that's my guy. I get it. It's fine. But you go back to the quote from Bo Schembechler. That's Harbaugh's guy. He's not going to pick and choose well, I like when Bo said that. I don't like this one. And he said pretty flat out, if you're the head coach, you got to know what's going on. You know right from wrong. If there's scandal, you're not allowed to say, I didn't know that was going on. If you do say that, then you're too dumb to have the job in the first place. That's pretty black and white. So, like I said, I still don't know. I'm not saying that Harbaugh knew about the manifesto and the depths. I just can't believe that all of this was seemingly happening underneath Jim Harbaugh's nose and he didn't know. I don't know how you can now we have an on-field assistant fired. And maybe another one coming. And a prominent booster's name, again, just cherry-picked out of thin air, apparently. He's denying any... I don't know, dude. It's hard for me to get my mind there. It just is. And I might be wrong. That's fine. But if Jim Harbaugh is really as invested and involved and hands-on as he is with everything and the culture and how the coaches work together on everything all the time, and this is the best communication they've ever had. All of them have said that. Best communication we've ever had on a staff. That's why we're so good. That's why this, that's why that. Well, but this part he didn't get. He didn't know. Just this part. Everything else, he got everything else, but not this one. I just can't get there. I can't, And like I said, I don't know if we'll ever know. I don't know if we'll ever know if Harbaugh knew anything at all. I know the NCAA investigation said they didn't find anything, but that means there was no paper trail. There weren't emails or text messages or Jim accessing XYZ. I don't know, man. At the end of the day, it just sucks because this team's really freaking good, and it looks like the shady work of a couple may literally derail one of the best things to ever happen to Michigan football in the history of its program. And I hate that.
Yeah, I mean that was another part of what Eisen talked about earlier today, that this is the best team he can remember since '97, and I think that's you wouldn't want this to happen at any year, whether it's whether Michigan's having a good season or a bad season. I mean, this is not there's no great time for something like this to happen, but I think that's where a lot of the frustration comes from. Is it just felt like Michigan had so much going into this year that they didn't need it. It wasn't needed. You didn't need what Connor Stallions was doing. You didn't need this sort of these guys aren't stupid. They're not idiots. Well, I mean, Connor Stallions didn't really cover his tracks all that well, but presumably these guys aren't stupid. They had to have known what they were doing was an issue. There's a reason why, if Jim Harbaugh didn't know about it, if other people didn't know about it, there's a reason why they didn't know about it, because there was some shit going on that shouldn't have been going on. And at the end of the day, it didn't need to happen. This team was talented enough to win without this stuff. And again, it's incredibly disappointing that, you're going into the 11th game of the season. You're looking at a historic milestone with win number 1,000, and head coach is not going to be there. The conversation really isn't about that. I mean, think about the fact that Jim Harbaugh has already served the 3-game suspension to start the year. He's finishing the season with a 3. That's 6 regular season games. He has missed half of the regular season due to various suspensions.
Sherrone Moore is going to coach almost as many games as Jim Harbaugh this year. It's wild.
At this point, like, I get wanting to defend Jim Harbaugh and wanting to defend the program, but at some point you got to look at it and say, okay, this isn't good. This isn't a good, this is not a good place. Like, sure, 10-0 is phenomenal. And it looks like Michigan's going to be allowed to continue to play, play against Maryland, play against Ohio State, potentially in the Big Ten championship and in the college football playoff. But this idea that like, it's not a big deal. They fired the people that were doing everything wrong. We'll just like, I don't understand that from a certain portion of the fan base. This is just, it's not a good look for Harbaugh. And I say that as a guy who appreciates everything he's done over the last 2 years, wanted him to sign a lifetime contract, give him the paper yesterday. And I can still get to a place where I say, this is not a great look for your head coach.
Yeah. And you're kind of tiptoeing around something I was going to say. And Tremaine kind of has a question. He's asking, how would this derail what these guys are accomplishing? Well, I think you could say that it derailed things for Chris Partridge and maybe another guy to come. And depending on what happens with Jim Harbaugh and any other assistant, I don't know how you can ask that question. How is it? Chris Partridge just got fired, dude. Pretty derailed for him. He just came back to Michigan, was getting a lot of praise as what he was doing with the linebackers and with special teams and working with Jay. And now he's unemployed. I'd say his year is pretty derailed. Connor Stallions, whatever. I mean, Chris and I have both given our opinions about him. His life's probably over in terms of what he thought he was going to do. Climbing the ladder, working with a big-time program, maybe being an analyst, maybe being a position coach someday. Who knows what's going to happen with Jim Harbaugh moving forward? He's clearly not feeling the Big Ten and the NCAA anymore. What would you call that? There are going to be some massive shakeups that come out from this. They have already started. That's derailed to me. Yeah, they may go on and win the whole thing, and that'd be great. I'd love to be there. I'm going to be there covering it, but it's not like it should have been, and it's not like I thought it would be at this point, because this team is winning like I thought they would, but they're dealing with all this other stuff, and it's really unfortunate. I mean, just because like you said, I don't think it ever needed to happen in the first place. And, I don't know. It sucks, man. Here we are again for the fourth week in a row, barely mentioning Maryland, barely mentioning J.J. McCarthy, Blake Corum, all the star players on this team. Instead, we're doing this. Yeah, we don't have to, but I mean, I started the room because I'm obviously not at home. I launched the room very early, probably the earliest I ever have. Just wanted to make sure it was up and running, make sure the internet was going. 4 or 5 comments came in from the YouTube page all about this. I mean, what are we doing? I saw a couple people say, enough, talk about football, but it's kind of hard, man. It's kind of hard. A position coach got fired today, 24 hours before the next game. Like, that's not normal. So I don't know.
All right, I'll tell you, I see some fans in the comments. You want to talk about the game? We can easily turn this into a fan-led Friday. What do you want to talk about Maryland? You bring up what you want to talk about this Maryland game, and I would be happy to discuss it. But I will say, in the meantime, while we're waiting for all the Maryland questions to roll in, the idea that, we've been live for 23 minutes now. The idea that we wouldn't spend a significant portion of a live show today talking about a member of Jim Harbaugh's staff being fired, the other reports that came out today about the booster, where this thing is headed. I think if you just want us to ignore, there's plenty of places you can go where they're not going to talk about it, and Maryland's going to be the talking point, and 1,000 wins, and JJ McCarthy and all-time records and all of that stuff. Like, there's places you can go where that's going to be the exclusive discussion, but I think we need to talk about some of this as well, because we cover the program. And if we're not going to discuss it, it just seems like a weird thing to brush aside. So again, if folks want to talk about Maryland, let's talk about Maryland. Let the questions come in. I would be happy to answer them.
Chris, I want to throw something at you real quick, because I think this was just like a week ago. How do you feel about Jim Harbaugh being at Michigan next year now? I think last week or when I asked you last, it was like instant no-brainer. He's going to get this extension 100%. He'll be back.
Yeah.
Today's feels like a blow. It feels like that's not awesome.
I don't feel as sure about it as I did a week ago.
That's probably
and
fair.
I feel like I said, I feel like as time goes by, I feel less and less sure about it. And I said this the other day. If you're the University of Michigan and you fully believe in Jim Harbaugh and take him at his word, the best thing you could do for this program right now is get the contract done. Because if you're a recruit and you're looking at the University of Michigan and you've got all these things going on, I don't know. Is my head coach going to be suspended next year? Will he even be there next year? Is there going to be a bowl ban next year? There's no telling what is going to come from the NCAA investigation. But if you're the University of Michigan, sure, issue that contract immediately. Get him to sign. Have some sort of assurance for these kids that are buying into the program that at least there's something about the future that is somewhat written in stone, something they can count on. Because right now, it feels like there is so much up in the air moving forward. Yeah, it's hard to say for sure. Yeah, he'll be back next year.
It's tough, man. It is. And, some of it stems from him just being pissed. It's not, I'm not even saying it from an angle like, oh, he's going to get canned. Dude, this has got to be wearing on him at this point. Now he's now had to, probably not personally, but he's had to fire an assistant coach that he held in high regard.
Matt Kirby, I think that's interesting. So Matt Kirby, he said that he thinks these 3 games essentially serve count for whatever NCAA upcoming penalty might be levied. I don't view it that way. To me, this is a Big Ten thing. This is what the Big Ten decided to do. This was an agreement between Michigan and the Big Ten. I think the NCAA is, look, we're going through our investigation, and once it concludes, they're going to hand out some sort of punishment. I fully believe that. Like, I don't believe at all that the NCAA is going to come to the end of this and say, okay, Michigan, you handled it right. You fired who needed to be fired. We're good. We're square. Like, there's going to be some punishment that comes from this. And you also have, yes, I know Jim Harbaugh served the 3-game suspension to start the year, but that was self-imposed. And the reason they took that step was because they couldn't come to an agreement with the NCAA on what the punishment should be for the recruiting infractions. And so when you take that and you combine it with this, I have a hard time believing that there wouldn't be any suspension for Jim Harbaugh to start the year next season.
Yeah, it's been unrelated. Like the NCAA, I feel like, more of this stuff. I feel like the NCAA hasn't even got to do with
some fucking characters in the comment section.
I know.
God.
I see someone suggesting Michigan hire Lloyd Carr. Jesus Christ. Dude's 80. I'm not in great health. Like what?
Chris, you're speculating and your emotions are slanting you negative. You have no idea.
Chris Partridge got fired today, folks. Fired.
Your head coach is suspended. You're under NCAA investigation.
Twice
now. Like, stop the bullshit. Like, it's not me and my emotions and my negativity. Jesus Christ. Like, can anybody out there just acknowledge that this is not good? And can we get on here for 30 or 40 minutes and talk about it? Yeah, I get it. Who cares? Just win. And if Michigan goes out and wins a national championship, I won't give a shit about any of this because I'll be wearing that t-shirt just as proudly as anybody else. But if Michigan doesn't win the national championship, everybody's going to look back on all of this stuff and it's going to become a much bigger deal. And that's the shame of it all, is that these players are caught in the middle. These guys have put months, years of hard work into this season for this opportunity. And going into game 11, this is the shit that they're having to deal with. It's completely unfair for these players, but for us to not talk about it, for us to not have an issue with it, come on.
Sean, I do apologize because I remember we were supposed to bring this back up and we did not. So if I ever bump into you, I'll buy you a beer because that's $10 you've now spent on a $5 question. So one of the reasons was because this felt like a closing type of question. I mean, you're talking about after Maryland, after Ohio State, Big Ten championship, playoff, bowl game, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I do think that's a valid question, though. Michigan's football program is going to look if everything else remains intact that's supposed to, it's going to look vastly different next year when you consider how many guys are leaving for the NFL or transfer or whatever, and the schedule. I mean, like, those two things alone are going to prove very difficult to deal with. You start talking about multiple staffers leaving, Harbaugh's, potential future, which we just got yelled at for whatever reason. 2024 is going to be a bitch compared to these last couple of years. The schedule is just way more difficult, and you're losing a ton of veteran leadership guys who happen to be NFL players. And that's a lot for any program to deal with, especially one that's also dealing with all this other crap. So, yeah, it's tough. The schedule is brutal. There's going to be a lot of guys not on that team next year, and the coaching staff, well, we already know it's going to be different by at least one guy, and that's probably not done. So, yeah, it's going to be a big change in 2024. I mean, I'm not saying Michigan's going to fall off and be terrible, but 12-0 for, like we've seen, is looking less and less likely when you just factor in all of those things. But that's why you play them.
I didn't predict them to go 12-0 in the regular season this year because it's just difficult to do that in back-to-back seasons, and I think they hadn't done it since like the 40s or something like that. So it's not something that happens often. But yeah, when you look at, you're losing a guy potentially like JJ McCarthy to the draft. That's a big deal. Who they have on the offensive line, guys like Blake Corum, the defense, Mike Sainristil, Chris Jenkins. You're talking about guys who are massive leaders and who have played a lot of football on this team. It's certainly going to have an impact. And then when you add into it, yeah, you play Texas. Yeah, you play Oregon. Yeah, you play USC. Like, it's going to be a difficult schedule next season, and it's hard to imagine that. I feel like all of these reasons are part of why it just kind of felt like everything was building to this season. Like, this was the season people were looking at and saying, "This is the year. This is the year for Michigan," and it still feels that way.
Yeah,
but man, all of this shit off the field is making it. It's really taken a lot of joy away from really some great football that we're seeing on Saturdays.
All right, here's a question about the game tomorrow. Let's go ahead and tackle it. Maryland has a pretty good quarterback in Talia Tagovailoa. We've talked about him before. How do we think the secondary holds up? I have said from the beginning of the year, I think top to bottom, the secondary is Michigan's best unit on its defense, which is saying a lot because their linebackers are studs, and so is their front four. But when you talk about the names, Will Johnson, arguably the most talented, high ceiling, high potential player on the entire team, probably will be the highest draft pick of anybody currently playing. Josh Wallace has proven to be as solid as you could possibly want, and that was really the only question mark on the defense. And then you throw in super smart, super versatile, super veteran guys like Mike Sainristil and Rod Moore, and then Makari Page, who has had a little bit of an up and down career, but I would trust him alongside any safety in the country at this point. That group of 5 dudes is as good as anybody in the nation, and a huge reason why Michigan has the number 1 defense. So,
yeah,
I like Talia Tagovailoa. I just like Michigan's secondary a lot more. Nobody throwing the ball scares me. Kyle McCord and Marvin Harrison do not scare me. So Talia Tagovailoa and his receivers certainly aren't going to either.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest risk with him, and I think I agree with Brandon, the secondary is going to hold up fine. The question is, will the front, will the linebackers, will they stay on assignment? Tagovailoa can get out. He can hurt you with his legs. And I think if he's going to do damage, that's probably where you're going to see it happen. But yeah, Mike Sainristil, Josh Wallace, Will Johnson, Rod Moore, all those guys, and Makari Page, like, they're going to do just fine in making life difficult for Tagovailoa. I think he probably throws a couple picks on Saturday. I think he's going to be running for his life. I think he's going to be forcing the issue because, quite frankly, he's going to have to force the issue in order for Maryland to even stand a chance in that game. Michigan still hasn't given up. We're going into week 11 now. Michigan still hasn't given up a point in the third quarter. They're going to have to force some things down the field. This defense is good enough to force a turnover. And so, Jill, I think the secondary holds up just fine. I think the defense overall holds up just fine. And it's a convincing win for Michigan.
And the depth behind that, you feel totally comfortable with a guy like Keon Sabb. You feel totally comfortable with a guy like Quentin Johnson, who's made a couple plays this year.
Let's not forget we have Kenneth Grant at like 6'4", 350 pounds who can run a 4.3 40 out there. We'll be fine. I mean, put him at corner for God's sakes.
Yeah, it was so funny. I think we talked about it, but when he was at the podium the other day, I guarantee no defensive tackle has ever gotten more questions at a press conference about their speed than he got like 10, and he said he ran a 4.9, but we'll go with 4.3. It sounds better when Chris said 4.3.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Let's see. I didn't want to jump into this question yet, but it is a good one. I think it's a very strongly debatable question. You can take either side of the coin with vigor. So let's do it. I don't really know if I have an answer. I'm going to be completely honest. I'm probably going to do a cop-out thing here. But do we think that at the end of all this nonsense, Michigan will have to vacate wins or lose these titles or banners or rings or however you want to slice it? I mean, look, dude, if you listen at all, which I would recommend not, but if you listen at all to some of the people who seem to have a voice, some of the words that have been thrown around, we talked about it, pathetic and disgusting and ruining the integrity of the game. I mean, you never heard any words like that when other teams were blatantly breaking recruiting rules year in and year out. I mean, like, I've had that, Chris, you and I kind of talked about this a little bit back and forth, like, getting a player that you're not supposed to get is against the rules, but I think you said, like, you didn't feel like that was the same as having, like, an on-field advantage of knowing what the other team was going to do. So we had a little bit of a differing opinion on that. I just kind of think, like, if you're breaking rules to have a better team, regardless of what rules we're talking about, you're affecting the integrity of the game. If you're like, if Clemson was not supposed to, I'm just using a random example. I have no idea about his recruitment. But if Clemson was not supposed to have Deshaun Watson, and then they dropped off a bag of poker chips from the IPTAY fund down there that Clemson uses, that part is true. They shouldn't have had that guy. They wouldn't have won a national title. I mean, like, it's a massive deal. So, no, nobody ever hired a private investigation firm to look at Clemson's recruiting practices or look at Alabama's or look at Georgia's. Dude, I covered recruiting for 8 years. I know those bastards cheated. I know it for a fact. But nobody ever dug into it. Nothing was ever done about it, so the integrity of the game is fine, right? That's where I just don't really know how you can do this. There's never really been a precedent like this before. And again, even when you look at, like, the Baylor example from a few years ago, it wasn't on the same scope. But I don't know, dude. I don't have an answer because we've never seen anything like it before. And I feel like it's just a slippery slope when you start to think about all of the other ways that teams have bent and broke rules over the years and nothing happened.
Yeah, the only way I can answer that, Zach, is it's a cop-out, but I think it's impossible to say. What I will say is that I don't think it's off the table. I don't think it's impossible.
I think that's fair.
I don't think it's impossible. And the fact that it's even a realistic possibility at this point, I think just shows you where this thing is at overall, and that you don't know how much further it's going to go. You don't know how much more is going to come out, but what has come out already doesn't look all that great. And, as Brandon said, it does speak to the integrity of the game. Now, I get it. People steal signs all the time. That's part of football these days. But when you cross that line and you start sending people into stadiums, or you're wearing goddamn disguises on the sidelines for other teams, like, you have crossed a line, and we are in uncharted waters, and nobody knows how the NCAA is going to handle this. So
he really pretended to be on another team, dude.
Yeah, he did.
That's fucking wild.
He did.
That is so wild.
So does Michigan vacate wins? Do they lose championships? My heart says no.
Right.
I certainly hope not, because I'll say, I started covering this team in 2021, and all I know is same as JJ McCarthy, beating Ohio State, Big Ten success. And to see all of that potentially at risk, or to see some of it be taken away, would be devastating as a fan. And I'm sure devastating as a player, as somebody who had, the blood, sweat, and tears into making all of it happen. I mean, say what you want about the coaching staff and Connor Stallions and what they may have been doing. These players fucking earned what they got. They deserved what they got. And again, that's one of the most unfortunate parts about this is it's legitimately, arguably the most talented team in the country, and they didn't need the services of Connor Stallions to do what they've been doing. But because of it, now all those accomplishments are called into question.
Yeah. Joey, I'm in lockstep with you. I just think that's a no-brainer. When you've got 6, 8, 10 guys that are going to play in the NFL that you wouldn't have had otherwise, unless you cheated and broke rules to get them to sign a letter of intent with your school, it's a huge deal. It affects the integrity of the game in ways that you can't even measure. My buddy Dan General up top said, like, yeah, you land a 5-star quarterback that you weren't going to get otherwise. Like the sport of football is so quarterback driven. I mean, it's why we just said that if Michigan doesn't have JJ McCarthy next year, I mean, what kind of a team are they even? Like, he's been that good. Like, that affects so much of what you do on the field. How could you even for a second say that that's not affecting the integrity of the game, the competitive advantage one way or the other? It's not as measurable. I would agree with that, but it's an even. Now you're talking about, again, use Deshaun Watson just off the top of my head, because that's kind of when Clemson really, really got rolling. Dude, he was there for 3 or 4 years. Now you're talking about 3 or 4 years of elevated play that you wouldn't have had otherwise. I just think, like I said, it's a slippery slope to go down and start talking about vacating wins and taking away championships because you broke a rule that you can't really measure. And again, this didn't happen to anybody else because no other team was investigated by a private PI firm on a whim. And it's weird to me. So to talk about vacating wins and giving titles back is, I don't like it. I don't know how to handle it.
And I will say, at this point, I don't think it matters. I don't think it matters necessarily who started it, why they started it, who the PI firm was, but that's still all stuff that's going to come out as well. That's just going to add another significant layer to this story. Who hired the PI firm? Why were they hired? Why did they take the initiative to bring evidence to the NCAA? So again, I think we're just a long, long way away from any of this being complete. We obviously want to see the Michigan football team succeed this year. We want to see them, beat Maryland, get 1,000, beat Ohio State, get to the Big, all that stuff, win a national championship. We want to see it. But it's also okay to admit that you're frustrated with what at least some members on the staff have been a part of. It's not an ideal situation to be. You don't want to hang your hat on the fact that you fire good when people fuck up. Like, that's not necessarily like a pat yourself on the back moment. I'm glad that Michigan is doing what they need to do and cooperating with the NCAA. And, what happened with Chris Partridge today is an example of what happens when you don't cooperate. So we'll see how it plays out. And, look, I don't want to do too much speculation, but for us to come on here and not share how we feel, not let some of that frustration come out, not just be real with how we feel about this stuff, is disingenuous to everything that we do here. And so if you're somebody that's not into that, it's real easy to tune out. But I've been doing this now for almost 3 years. We've had this show now for almost 3 years. And I'm certainly not interested in changing the way we go about business, because when Michigan does something good and things are going great, we'll log on here and we'll talk about it for an hour and a half. But when things aren't so great, we're also going to talk about that as well.
Yeah, and I said this going back to my, my days when I was clearly a Harbaugh hater and I just couldn't stand the guy. 2020 season when I thought his, he had reached the end of his rope. I talk about this stuff the same way on here. And Chris and I, we have had, going back to the beginning of our show, we had deep, in-depth conversations about, like, we want to take, because we would shoot the shit on the phone and then we'd get on the pod and it wouldn't sound the same. And we'd get off and we'd be like, dude, like, what? Like, when we're talking on the phone, like, let's just go on the pod. Like, that should be the show. I pride myself on now, after 220 plus episodes or wherever we're at, I talk on here, how I talk to Chris on the phone, how I talk to my buddies, my cousin, my dad. Like, I just let it out. So Chris is talking about, some emotions coming out. This is how we're feeling about this. This is how we're feeling about that. Is it speculation? Is it water cooler talk? Is it just we're just talking about what's going on? I feel like we would be being very disingenuous if we didn't do it that way. And,
Sure.
I wish I could snap my fingers and none of this shit was happening. I'd love to just dive into Maryland and talk about how I think Michigan should and could win by 40. I'd rather do that any day of the week. But like Chris said earlier, to come on here and just not like, dude, a full-time assistant was fired today. And people are like, it's no big deal. It is,
Your head
man.
coach was supposed to be in court today and then decided not to. Like, even that's weird.
I also saw someone say, like, this shit happens all the time. Jimbo was just fired. Yeah, it happens when shit's bad. That's when it happens. It does happen. You're right. It sucks when it does. It's not supposed to. So, there was no way in how, like, I mean, before we started the pod, I talked to Chris. I was like, look, dude, like, Friday's a busy show. We got a lot of segments. We've got my predictions about the specific game, score predictions. We usually talk about the rest of the Big Ten. We do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And Chris was like, well, let's just see where it kind of goes. And like I said, 5 comments in, it's all about this Uncle T and Connor Stallions and this and that, whatever. So, yeah,
And
we're 45 minutes in now.
I'm not seeing a ton of questions about Maryland. I'm looking.
Not really. We've said that now 15 minutes ago. Fire off your Maryland questions. And there's been a few.
Yeah.
And we've talked about a couple. We talked about Talia Tagovailoa. I still think Michigan's going to win by a lot tomorrow. And I'm going to enjoy it for 3 hours while they're playing.
They're what, 19-point favorites, 20-point favorites, something like that. I mean, they're going to win convincingly. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And I do think, and I've seen some people bring it up that I'm sure Michigan has a chip on its shoulder, and I'm sure that they're feeling a certain type of way. And I'm sure that that's in part helping to motivate them. But it doesn't mean that, like, if you could push a button and just not have this happening, you wouldn't push it immediately. So I think the team's handling it well because this is a team of mature players, leaders, veterans, captains that know how to take things like this and, internalize it however you need to, and then go out and handle your business on Saturday. I think that's what the makeup of this team is. So when it comes to the actual game on Saturday, I have no doubt that what's going on outside isn't going to have a negative impact on what happens on the field. These guys are too seasoned. They're too good at what they do. Sherrone Moore talked about it this week. That's not this team. Even, his name escapes me. Defensive line coach.
Mike Elston.
Somebody asked him, I think it was Angelique, asked him about a trap game. He said, it's not even in our vocabulary. Yeah. We don't operate that way. They understand the opportunity in front of them. They want to win every single time they're on the field, and they know they can't get to 12-0 until they get to 11-0. And a lot of time that sounds like coach speak. It sounds like bullshit. Not with this group of players, man. They're different. And that's, again, I hate to sound like a broken record, but it's one of the most unfortunate parts about this is this team, not just talented on the field in terms of their skill set, but the way they're wired mentally, the maturity that they have. Like, these guys deserve all the success that's coming their way. And to spend 45 minutes talking about boosters and Connor Stallions and Chris Partridge and suspensions and investigations, it sucks. We would prefer not to.
Yeah, I'll say this. I mean, Chris, I know I've been pretty open about this before. I'm not trying to put words in Chris's mouth, but neither one of us love press conferences. Like, they're not awesome. A lot of it's bullshit. A lot of it's fluff. But I will say this team has not operated in coach speak or lip service in like 3 years. I think back to Big Ten Media Day with Aiden Hutchinson, and they were talking, and I remember Chris and I were like, do you believe it? Do you believe them? Because remember that we didn't know what was going to happen that year. And Michigan went on to have a phenomenal season, just the one blip, and then they beat Ohio State, and the rest is kind of history since then. But since then, this team hasn't really operated in lip service. So to Chris's point, it is a mature team. They are going to handle business. They are saying things that, sound a little cliche at times, but when you watch them perform and you see how they kind of dust this stuff off, I mean, if they believe it, they believe it, and then it's not lip service anymore. So that's kind of where they've been, and that's where they will be. And I mean, if you want to throw all that mushy nonsense bullshit out, Michigan's just better than Maryland. Like, they're going to win. I have no doubt about it. They went into Penn State last week without a head coach. did what they did on the ground and beat that team. And this team lost 51-15 to that team a week ago, 2 weeks ago now. So I'm not concerned about tomorrow's game at all. But yeah, to say that this isn't like swirling around or being processed or being somehow filtered out, I think would be a little untrue. I think this team's just really good at it. I really do.
Speaking about how good they are, how about, look, you want to talk about something positive? How about JJ McCarthy? The highest winning percentage of any quarterback over the last 10 seasons with a minimum of 20 starts.
Pretty incredible.
I mean, number one, above Trevor Lawrence, above Tua Tagovailoa. I mean, he's in some elite company at 22-1. Fully believe he's going to go to 23-1 this weekend. But, again, you talk about these guys that you might lose next season, like just what an absolute get that was for this football program in terms of how skillful he is on the field, his mental makeup. I mean, Jim Harbaugh is guilty of hyperbole. He'll say some things. Look at what he said about Alex Orji going into the season. Quite possibly the best kick returner to ever play at the University of Michigan. Hasn't returned.
No.
What was the exact quote?
It was in the history of the sport.
In the history,
I remember.
Okay.
I remember thinking like Deion Sanders might want to question. You might want out of a word. History of the sport.
Bottom line, has not even been on the field for a special teams play this season. So, but he said that. He said it on multiple occasions that JJ McCarthy is the best quarterback in Michigan football history. And, you can go in the record, but like, I don't know that anybody's ever going to pass Chad Henne and what he did. I mean, he started as a true freshman. He's got almost 10,000 passing yards. It's going to be hard to do, especially these days when guys go to the league a little bit early. But what I will say is I can't remember a guy that I feel like has had such a positive impact on a football program from so many different angles than JJ McCarthy. And when he leaves, he will be sorely, sorely missed.
That might be the understatement of the year. I mean, the dude has been lights out, man. I mean, the numbers speak for it, the way he conducts himself and carries himself, the leader that he is.
Look, Orji might be hurt. I'm not saying he is. I'm not saying he isn't, but I've seen him on the field. I've seen him taking snaps, and I haven't seen him in special teams yet. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Let the guy return. I'm an Orji advocate. Love Orji. Get him on the field.
52 minutes and 23 seconds. I'm gonna go
Strong advocate.
I advocate for orgies.
Yeah.
Good times. As we're getting closer to the 1 hour mark, throw a couple of these questions up here. Jackie wants to know if we're going to be at the game. Well, Chris is doing God's work. Chris will be at the game.
Oh yeah.
I, for the first time this season, am opting out. I'm opting out. I priced it out. We're only going to be there for Chris, you're going to be there for 24 hours, maybe, right? I mean, it's a quick turnaround.
Yeah.
And with the fact that Michigan's probably going to win by quite, if this was Penn State on the road, or I really wanted to go to Nebraska earlier this year and check that out and see that stadium. I went to Minnesota because my sister happens to live out there. That was a nice thing. I got to see her, and I don't ever really get to. I did miss the game earlier this year. I forgot. I was sick as hell. I missed. Was it the UConn game? Maybe
Bowling Green.
Bowling Green. There you go. Did they even play UConn this year? I don't know. Might have been 2 years ago. Whatever. Missed the game earlier this year. I will not be there tomorrow. Just going to cover it from home. Chris will be on hand. We talked about this too. Like, obviously the 1,000th win is a really big deal. Not sure what it'll look like at an away game. I think at a home game, it would have been incredible. They probably would have done a bunch of stuff on the field and whatever they would have done, but it might be kept more in-house on the road in the locker room, but there'll be some mention of it, obviously, during the post-game press conference. And then, I was also like, dude, if Harbaugh's back on the sidelines, I'm going to want to be there for that. Well, he's not. So there you go. Chris will be in College Park shooting the game. What's the weather looking like for you down there, big fella? You going to be
mid-50s. I leave for the airport at 3:30 in the morning. Going to get to the airport a little after 4. Flight takes off around 6. Get to Maryland by 7:30. Hop a cab. Probably go to the hotel, drop some shit off, get in another cab, head straight to College Park. Shoot the game, come back to the hotel, load some photos for you guys, and then hop a plane to Chicago on Sunday. Got a 2-hour layover there in the Windy City, and then fly back home. So, it's just it's part of the deal, man. Like I've said this before. I was talking to Trent a little bit about it. We were talking about, the drive to Nebraska, the 11 hours there, 11 hours back, the marathon that was, the Penn State travel and all of that stuff. And, it's easy to like kind of get wrapped up in it and be like, man, it sucks that I have to do this. And then I constantly have to remind myself what it is I'm doing. Like I am hopping on a plane to go watch Michigan football, play in Maryland on the road to get 1,000 wins, make college football history. And if that's the biggest inconvenience I have in my professional life, I think I've got it pretty damn good.
Well, you got to realize, like you mentioned, the 11-hour drive to Nebraska and back, which was all the way through the night. Shout out to Chris for making the drive. I was like, dude, we can stop. And he's like, nah, we'll just keep going.
Well, I had to make it back from my son's soccer game.
That's right.
That was the driving factor there. Had to be at the soccer.
So we could have stopped for like a couple hours. It just didn't make any sense. But the point I was going to make was that we could ask any one of our 50 buddies and they would jump in the car with us in a blink of an eye. So yeah, it's a lot, but it's still a blessing every day that we get to do this for a job. And yeah, trust me, I was very, very torn on whether or not I wanted to go. You price it out. I'm not going to put all the business out there, but we're approaching $1,000 when you talk about what it's going to cost to fly, hotel, food, Uber, cab, whatever, parking. I don't know. I just couldn't do it for Maryland. Am I disrespecting Maryland by not going?
I mean, disrespecting Maryland, disrespecting Michigan's milestone. I mean,
no, it ain't that.
There's a lot of disrespect. A lot of disrespect there.
It's not like they're not going to let us in the locker room.
You never know. Certainly won't be there if you're not there.
Listen, Harbaugh's not there. Maybe they will let you in the locker room.
Well, here's the deal. And I put this out. I reported it today. Jim Harbaugh is going to travel with the team. He is going to be in Maryland, probably going to watch the game with his brother John, which again, cool. if you're Fox, get a goddamn camera in that room, get the Harbaugh cam going. Like I would love to hear live commentary from Jim and John as the game is going on. But I was really happy to hear that Jim was going to make the trip with his team because, Sherrone talked about it a little bit. Mike Elston talked about it a little bit, just how disappointing they would be if Harbaugh wasn't on the sideline for such a big milestone. And, he's obviously not going to be on the sideline for it, but the fact that he's going to be in Maryland, I got a feeling that they're going to meet up pretty quick after the game is over and celebrate appropriately. So it's good that he's going to be there. Chris. I don't give a shit, gentle comedian. I don't care. Put your name on it. Let's see your picture. You got a lot to say in this comment section, but nobody knows who you are.
What attitude? Like, dude, if you can't stand
a clown, guy or gal has been a clown the entire time. It's kind of the
ass out of the kitchen, dog. Like, if you don't think some of this stuff is not good and it hurts your feelings for us to say it, suck your thumb, get a blankie, and get the hell out of here. We don't need you. All right? I mean, come on, dude. There's been no negative attitude. It's just been talking about what's happening. If that makes you cry, so be it. I don't know what to tell you.
Chris Partridge was fired today. Why are you so negative, though?
I mean,
sorry.
Anyway, I just saw that at the end.
We got baited into it.
I know, dude. I know.
That's what they wanted, and we gave it to them. Damn it.
It's like negative. It's the negative Yelp reviews just over and over and over again. Like,
listen, I'll say this. If somebody doesn't want me somewhere for being completely honest with where I stand and how I feel, then I don't want to fucking be there anyway. That's where I'm at. So going to keep doing that. Not going to change that. Should we get to wait, what was he was fired, but in a good way. There you go.
I like that.
Here's why, Michigan did a phenomenal job today by letting go Chris Partridge.
Just absolutely incredible effort firing Chris Partridge today. I mean, I heard everybody was all smiles. Yeah. Partridge was laughing, ass slapping. I mean, it was great.
And that was kind of what Taylor Lewan put out some sort of tweet about how it's great to see Michigan continue to hold the highest standards. They're not going to allow people, there was some sarcasm in his tweet, but I mean, essentially it was the same thing.
He was skipping out of Schembechler Hall today. Let me tell you, that dude was happy. It's about as good as it could have go. As good as it could go. So
what are we going to do? Are we going to get to score predictions here? Talk about how we think this is going to play out?
Yeah, we'll finish with score predictions. Me, you, and Trent did submit that earlier. Article is up on Wolverine Digest. Again, I mean, it's probably not that surprising. I mean, when you think about how these games are going to go, like we always like, but I think today may have been the closest we've had in terms of our predictions and what scores we guessed. Almost identical. I'm trying to pull it up right here so I have the exact right numbers. And here we go. Chris, do you know what you said? Well, I'll do Trent's first. Trent said,
roll Trent first.
Trent said Michigan 38. Maryland 10. So a 28-point win for the Wolverines on the road that would easily cover the spread. He tossed out the words trap game, which we've addressed a little bit earlier, sandwiched in between Penn State and Ohio State. Just don't think Maryland's good enough to do anything with that. He mentions Michigan's veteran-led team. We've said that as well. The Terps are not great on pass defense. So he thinks JJ is going to have a big day, thinks that's going to get JJ kind of rolling again. Not like JJ had a bad week last week. He just didn't ask him to throw it. He threw it 8 times, completed 7 of them, but he thinks JJ is going to get rolling again. Michigan wins comfortably 38-10. Chris, your score, please.
Yeah, I've got Michigan winning 42-10. I think it's going to be a comfortable win. I think they're going to cover the spread. I also think it's going to be kind of a throwback to what we saw earlier in the season for reasons that I mentioned, I think, on the last time we went live, is that, for me, with J.J. McCarthy in particular, you don't want anybody to get injured in this game. And I've seen J.J. limping around a little bit. It seems like the ankle has been sort of an ongoing issue throughout the year. I think if you can, have a commanding lead after 3 quarters, you do what we saw earlier in the season. You pull all your starters, you let your backup guys play in the 4th quarter, and I think that's how we end up getting to 42-10. So again, convincing win for Michigan. Business as usual. Don't think any of the outside stuff is going to serve as at least a negative impact on what happens on the field. Convincing win, and you come back to Ann Arbor with 1,000 in your pocket. Pretty incredible.
1,000, and I said 41-10. So all of us think 10. For Maryland, maybe that's an early field goal. They get close enough to get a shot at it at least, and then maybe a late touchdown. We've seen that quite a few times.
I was going to say, in Michigan, either a late touchdown or giving up the first touchdown potentially on like an opening or second drive, and then you shut them down for the remainder of the game, like kind of that type of scenario.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even reference much about the specific approach or the game plan or stats or what I think. It's just what we've talked about. Veteran-laden team. They're not going to let the outside noise bother them. They know it's a business trip. They know they're better than Maryland. They know they're not going to have their head coach. And I think, at the end of the day, Sherrone Moore is a really sharp dude. He's a really sharp dude. He's got this team's, confidence. They all believe in him. I'm sure they'd rather have Jim Harbaugh there than Sherrone Moore to be filling in for him. But I think they're totally comfortable with Sherrone Moore calling the shots, not only calling the offense, which he's done all year, but making decisions and leaning on his other coaches who are also really freaking good, man. I mean, you've got multiple dudes on that team who have been associate head coaches before. Mike Elston, Mike Hart. It's a top to bottom superstar staff, man. And I think, it's crazy to think that I'm not going to say that Rick Minter is a better coach than Chris Partridge, but the dude's qualified. He's going to be just fine coaching linebackers tomorrow against Maryland. Obviously, kind of being thrown into it last minute isn't awesome, but he knows what he's doing. He knows football. He's been a DC before. He's been around coaching forever. I mean, it's a long labor of love for him, dude. And so he's probably pumped about the opportunity. He wouldn't like it to come this way, but I think Michigan will be just fine. The team will be ready to roll 41-10. Another easy one.
Yeah. And then we get ready for what, I mean, I know we're going to have plenty of time to talk about it, but this game against Ohio State, and there's going to be, listen, if you're a fan out there who's 1 week at a time, God damn it, don't look ahead. Don't listen. But this game between Michigan and Ohio State coming up on November 25th, I don't know that there's going to be 2021 was highly anticipated. 2022, this game this year, with all the other noise going on, it's going to be big. Ban ESPN and College Game Day from coming to Ann Arbor. Can somebody do that, please? Do not allow that crew in Ann Arbor. Get them out. I see Paul Feinbaum in Ann Arbor. It's on site.
That is an interesting thought. That is an interesting thought. They've been everybody at that whole network has been so anti-Michigan because they have a beef with the Big Ten and they slurp the SEC. It's weird. And then on the flip side, the Fox network, like Colin Cowherd, has just been slurping Harbaugh in Michigan. It's just like, I would just like something.
It's weird. I find myself being a fan of Fox lately.
Well, yeah, I've always actually been a pretty big fan of Cowherd.
Strange how that works. When you hear shit you like, you become a fan of it.
Yeah, that is strange.
And you know what? If they do show up in Ann Arbor, welcome them appropriately.
AJ, thank you for the donation at the last minute here. What does it mean if Sherrone beats Day?
It means everything.
It means a lot. It means that Sherrone Moore's a damn good coach. It means that Michigan's got Ryan Day's number. It means that Ryan Day's beard is atrocious. It means that Ohio State has now handed over the torch permanently. I mean, if they haven't already, 2 20-point wins back-to-back is big enough. But you do 3 in a row convincingly, maybe.
Listen.
That town may not exist come Sunday morning.
With what Michigan is going through, can we say at this point, no excuses? Is that fair?
Yeah.
If you're Ohio State, are you and you get your ass kicked in Ann Arbor, are you going to lean on the sign stealing thing, or have we reached a point of no excuses on November 25th? Are we there? I just want to know the terms before we go into the game.
I've been saying that too. I got into it with somebody on Twitter, and I was like, how do they have to win in how many games until you just stop saying that?
Yeah.
Now they've got 3. One of them was a big one. One of them was a rival on the road by 50. Dude, how do they have to do it and how many times? I don't know, man. Doing it against Ohio State for the 3rd year in a row would certainly be enough in my book.
Indeed.
There you go. Safe travels to Chris. I'm gonna have a much more relaxed day, but yeah, Chris will be there for the 1,000th. We hope the 1,000th win. There's no way they don't get it, right? No way.
It's happening.
And we'll see what transpires on the field, and then we'll be back. I don't know, Chris. You're going to be awfully busy tomorrow. You think you squeeze in a show at any point, or is that not on the books?
Probably not a post game. No, I don't think it's going to be a post game. Just too chaotic trying to get out of there and get to where I need to be. But certainly, once we get back on Monday, get rolling again, and hopefully nothing else has happened, and we can talk Ohio State. Spend the whole week talking football and Ohio State. How refreshing!
That would be nice, Jobu. I'm throwing it up there just because you paid, but I don't. Who the hell knows? Who knows? I don't even know what that's about. That's been weird. No, never mind. I was going to say that's been weirder than this, but it hasn't.
No, it's all weird.
It's been quieter than this. Much quieter, which makes it weird. Who the hell knows? We'll see.
Quiet little FBI investigation. No big deal.